Welcome on in to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. It's Super Bowl week. I'm your host, John McKechnie. That is Mario Puig. Today's episode, you guessed it, folks, we are going to be breaking down Super Bowl 59 from every angle that we can think of, diving deep. We got the game coming up Sunday in New Orleans. A lot of buildup, a lot of storylines, a lot of narratives. Going into this one, the Chiefs obviously going for the first three-peat in Super Bowl era history. The Eagles looking for their second ring in franchise history. And it is funny, Mario. Earlier this week, our guy Jim Coventry famously does his Super Bowl marathon, where he has just a rapid-fire list of great analysts from across the industry on with him to break down the Super Bowl. And about an hour in, it didn't take me an hour to realize this, but it was funny to see the breadth of this theme go for the entirety of an hour, to where, we sit in the analyst chair too, but everyone kind of is in lockstep when it comes to breaking down this game. It's just, well, the Eagles have the better team, the better roster. You'd say that their defense is better. They have the best non-Patrick Mahomes player in this game in Saquon Barkley. The offensive line is better, and it's getting healthier. So unit by unit, you'd kind of say, other than quarterback and head coach, the Eagles have the advantage here. But then the pushback, of course, is, but the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes. And every analyst kind of came down differently on what that all meant to them. Some people were on the side of the Chiefs, some people on the side of the Eagles, but that's kind of the general lay of the land. Do you have any other kind of additional thoughts here? Because again, right now it does feel like, with everyone having all the time in the world to study this game over the last couple of weeks, it's just better team versus team with the greatest quarterback possibly ever.
I didn't realize that was the consensus take on the game, but that is interesting. I guess I more or less had the same sort of theme going on, but I don't know. I guess I wouldn't quite phrase it as the Eagles having the better overall team and the Chiefs having the Mahomes, bailing them out at every turn, as much as I think the Eagles are both well built, uniquely well built, and the way they are built and the way both sides of the ball really are types of football that can present some challenges to any team, of course, but to the Chiefs, I think, especially because as much as the Eagles can't get in a shootout, in my opinion, or at least I would be surprised if the Eagles could both win the game and have Jalen Hurts throw the ball 35, 40 times. I just think that the Eagles have strengths at the spots that can apply the most kind of pressure on the Chiefs and the parts of the roster that normally contribute to their victories. So the Mahomes part, of course, is the leading story for the Chiefs, and he is the best player in the game, in the league. So with that does make him dangerous. But I don't know. I feel like this Chiefs team is worse than the last Chiefs team that played the Eagles in the Super Bowl. And the Eagles team, while throwing for less production, is better to me because they have Saquon Barkley to bridge the difference. And with that trade-off, Hurts has had a higher completion percentage, more yards per attempt, fewer turnovers per drop back. So to me, it's that the Eagles got better since last time and the Chiefs got worse. Maybe that's still not enough for the Eagles, but I think the Eagles are a good kind of team, composition for challenging the Chiefs as they are.
Yeah, I think, kind of dovetailing off of that, I think that this has sort of been the prevailing narrative the last three Super Bowls. Maybe it was a little bit harder to make the argument that the Eagles were the better roster the last time that these two faced, but there was still a reason why the line was what it was back in Super Bowl 57. But last year, I certainly felt like it was a game where the Chiefs didn't underperform to the extent that they did this year during the 2023 season, but they still weren't blowing the doors off of everybody in that Super Bowl run. But they really felt like they loudly flipped the switch during the postseason last year. I mean, they crushed the Dolphins. They go on the road. They beat up on the Bills and the Ravens. And it's like, okay, well, they got their mojo back, but this is still a 49ers team that is just loaded pretty much everywhere. So I liked the Niners last year. This to me feels like kind of the ultimate test of the Patrick Mahomes camp, essentially, because this really does feel, and I'm definitely in agreement with you, where this is the least convincing Chiefs team of its current dynastic run. Like I think that there's certainly something to be said for having the alligator blood to win all those one-score games and kind of mentally mush the other team into making the wrong mistake at the wrong time. I'm not going to get into the referee stuff. I'm not super interested in that on this podcast, but they just have this way of staying cool when the other team doesn't, and they always seem to kind of be able to benefit from that. But again, this is an Eagles team that's just nasty. I really had some doubts about the Eagles going into the postseason. I worried about their ability, especially in a type of shootout, back and forth type of game, to be able to keep up. I don't know if the way that they beat Washington is all that applicable, if that makes sense to this game, because I think that all in all, they got a really nice draw in the NFC Championship game. I mean, if they played the Lions, I think it would have been a much different game, but that's the way it went. So they were able to kind of punch their ticket with ease to the Super Bowl, whereas the Chiefs had to, really kind of battle to get it done against the Bills. But yeah, we will see if the Mahomes magic can kind of overcome the other kind of shortcomings on this roster relative to what is an Eagles team that is really top to bottom extremely impressive. So we're going to kind of structure the show looking at the Eagle, or what to look for when the Eagles have the ball first, and then we'll get into what it looks like when the Chiefs have the ball. But yes, let's go ahead, kick things off. Philly's offense versus the Chiefs defense. Where does that conversation start for you?
Well, I guess this is obvious, but it starts with the run game, I think, because it is, if nothing else, the one difference, or the clearest difference, I think, between this Eagles Super Bowl team that's facing the Chiefs and the last one, which lost to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And I think it's obvious enough by now that while Jalen Hurts might be at once a good quarterback, or a really good quarterback, especially for the Eagles in the way that they're built, they don't want to get in games where it's a shootout for pass attempts and dropbacks. They want Jalen, as much as possible, Jalen Hurts' usage to be on the ground, because you don't even need to see it as like a hiding him as a passer kind of thing. It's more like when they're running that much, it means that they're in a position to do it. And of course, combining Hurts' rushing ability, Barkley, the offensive line that the Eagles have, which, as you mentioned, is healthier. Cam Jurgens playing at center moves Dickerson back to whatever guard spot he's at. And if you can get into so much as a 3rd and 5 with that group, the defense is still in trouble. Even if you tell them, like, yeah, we're running it 2 more times, they're still in a difficult spot as a defense. So I just feel it's such a, especially in a league that I view overall as kind of thinned out this year, the Eagles' combination of offensive line, like raw talent on the offensive line, raw running ability in terms of big playability, mostly from Saquon, and raw power between both Hurts and Barkley, is a really unique sum of stressors for a defense to face. And then when you put in A.J. Brown, even Devontae Smith, that's just such a lot to deal with. And as long as you don't have to make Hurts drop back so many times that he starts to reveal his shortcomings as a passer, which is, I think, something that comes up. The more you expose any passer, the more their limitations are likely to surface. And with Hurts, it's just as simple as, in my opinion, he's good at throwing some pass setups, and on some others, he's not particularly good to the extent that it's best not to do it at all. And that's why I think it's kind of important to limit his volume, because the more his pass attempt volume goes up, the more you necessarily need to start making him throw passes that he isn't as good at, because the defense will start sitting on the ones that have already worked. You can't just keep going back to it forever. So that's why, I think the Chiefs, it's important that they stop the run game. It's just kind of an obvious thing to point out. It's just, I think it goes to more than just stopping the run. I think it's because it's like by stopping the run, you make Hurts as much of a liability to the Eagles as possible. And that's, if you view the game as getting the better quarterback production, the way you harm the Eagles' quarterback production, I think, is actually by making them throw the ball a lot more than they should.
I think so too. I think if the Eagles do get that ground game established, the two-pronged attack, the offensive line paving the way, and then you've got the Hurts threat, and of course Saquon. I got a little bit silly with. I was in Tennessee this past weekend, and I'm going to spoiler alert. I mostly took the Chiefs on the money line for this game, but I covered myself with a couple of interesting what ifs on the Eagles side of things. There's a bet out there or a market out there for Super Bowl rushing record. I said, nice. Sure, I'll take that for on Saquon.
Do you remember what the record is?
I think it was over 200 yards. I think it was like 205 is the record. I feel remiss not knowing this off the top of my head, but alas, I did take that particular wager, and I also in a game like this, you want to build a narrative and kind of build your card off of it. So I did one where Saquon scores 2 touchdowns and the Eagles win, and those odds were like 5-1, because it's like if he does score 2 or more touchdowns, we have a pretty good chance here that the Eagles are doing exactly what they want to do offensively. And at that point, I think the Chiefs would absolutely be in trouble. So, I mean, the way that Saquon's playing right now, it's just like, if anyone out there used to play NFL Street, it's like he's got game breaker mode on all the time.
Oh, I did love that game. I can't remember what that part of it was, though.
You string enough good plays together, and your player just sort of turns blue, and it becomes like completely unstoppable,
up kind of thing. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That game was sick though. Really good PlayStation 2 game. I think it's just it might be possible for the Chiefs to stop or contain Barkley at no particular additional cost, but generally there is some kind of cost to that. The level of commitment that it takes, especially like an offensive line that the Eagles have, you're not as great as Spagnuolo is, and as much as Spagnuolo will be on the scent as much as it is possible to be, there's generally not, there's a limitation to how much you can kind of outsmart the Eagles in the trenches. It's like you can have a great blitz call, a great play design, but sometimes you just need to be able to get around a person who's as big as Jordan Mailata. And that's the more the game comes down to details like that, the more it suits the Eagles, I think.
Right. I think that's an interesting tension in this game, because I think a lot of people, and I think it's justified, point to the fact that Spagnuolo is basically the greatest big game coordinator ever. It's unbelievable that, you don't really get it in this day and age, a guy who's content with being a coordinator and just being extremely great at that. Obviously, he's had,
to be fair, he did burn out as a head coach,
yes,
but credit to him to kind of know where he has real ability and where he would be kind of, out of his depth.
And he's, right here. I mean, this is the sweet spot for him, but ultimately, I think you're kind of driving at this a little bit too. Like, scheme is getting your players in the right position, or showing things that the other team hadn't seen on tape before. I mean, I think that was kind of a prevailing storyline coming out of the late game, the decisive play in the AFC Championship game, where I don't think the Bills had seen the Chiefs come out in that look or do what they did coming out of that particular look. So that's all well and good, but there is an element of the Jimmies and Joes here, as opposed to the X's and O's. And the Eagles, they're Jimmies, they're Joes. They're really big and they're really talented. And that takes its toll on the opposing defense over the course of 60 minutes. So personnel-wise, what everyone knows Chris Jones, but what else, are we really looking for when it comes to the Chiefs as far as strengths and weaknesses on the defensive side of the ball in terms of their personnel?
Well, as much as I'm sure Steve Spagnuolo has certain tendencies with his play calls and the personnel that he uses, a way that the Chiefs are a little different than most teams is they kind of just have situational defenses and they're kind of prepared to go to any of them. So again, as much as they have some tendencies in terms of just what they've run the most, it's probably not so much that they have like a rigid scheme in mind as much as they're just responding to the offense's personnel and play calling tendencies in each case. So even guessing, I feel like anyway, even guessing what kind of scheme Spagnuolo will call isn't the easiest thing. Of course, they're going to use primarily some players more than others, but they have kind of a lot of rotation going on at linebacker, a little bit in the secondary. I guess normally what you see is Shamari Connors playing in the slot/rover kind of role, which allows him to kind of do linebacker sort of stuff without necessarily giving it away. So I think that's overall like their nickel defense, you'd more or less say. So the nickel defense plus Chris Jones plus I guess Bolton is the main thing, and then the other linebackers aside from Bolton, the other defensive linemen aside from Jones can change depending on what they're kind of trying to run. But I feel like unless Spagnuolo just comes up with some kind of genius trick, the Chiefs don't, like any team, the Chiefs don't exactly have an ideal group of personnel to respond to what the Eagles can pose, especially in the run game. You look at a guy like Tershawn Wharton, who's a good player and is more or less a starting defensive tackle for the Chiefs, but he's pretty much like a gap splitting specialist who would ideally only play in nickel formations. Like he's not even particularly big by like defensive end standards. So that guy, maybe he can be good at like splitting gaps somehow. Maybe they put him on Mekhi Becton, thinking like, oh, Mekhi Becton can't reach this low, into the side, and Tershawn Wharton can get underneath his hands. Maybe something like that is there, but otherwise, again, if you just reduce the game to 5 phone booths, pretty much, I don't know how the Chiefs respond. I don't know how the Chiefs try to fill gaps the way that the Eagles do without even trying. Not to skip to the Eagles defense here, but it's like the Eagles defense doesn't need to try to hold gap integrity, and they just do it by incidental happenstance. The Chiefs need to make a deliberate effort to gear up for that kind of game, and I just don't really. Even Chris Jones, as massive and disruptive as he is, he's not really a gap holding kind. Like he's not a 2-gap defensive tackle. He's a splitting kind of defensive tackle. So, and he's like a bending, off the edge kind of defensive tackle. So I feel like the Eagles ought to be able to kind of batter them between the guards, between the tackles. And I don't know what the Chiefs defense can do in response other than kind of try to run blitz in response. And, that's easy enough said, I guess. But the problem with that is, particularly when you're talking about a runner as explosive as Barkley, if you miss a little bit, the cost can be the rest of the field. So there's this tension between like, is it even really worth trying to stop Barkley, or should you sort of just be content to give up 4 and 5 yard gains over and over? And that might normally make some sense, but not in my opinion, when the Eagles can take a 3rd and 4 and just quarterback sneak it 2 times every time and get a first down.
Exactly. And something I just kind of was playing around with it in my head. What one thing that could stop the Eagles here is kind of the Eagles, where say the Chiefs come out with a game plan and the run game starts slow. At that point, does Nick Sirianni feel the pressure? Does he get outside of himself and they start making coaching sequencing exactly type of errors? But I'm reminded also that this year the Eagles were kind of famously slow starters. So I think that they're not actually going to be that. I mean, the Super Bowl ramps up the pressure, of course, but I don't think that they would be that discouraged by a slow start, because generally they are content to just have it be body blows in the first half that turn into haymakers in the second half. And we've seen that time and again. throughout the course of the season, including the postseason. So for a moment there, I was wondering, apologies for the dog, if they were to kind of have the run game not work initially, would they get away from it, get outside themselves? I think they are kind of like uniquely battle tested to be like, actually, we'll take that on the chin, get ball up top. We're going to get you next time.
It's challenging for any team, any coach to not fall into that trap because I see it as kind of like the coaching equivalent of getting the yips, more or less. You just kind of lose your cool and feel like the need to panic when it's just not appropriate yet. There's no telling what Sirianni, Moore, whoever might do in that situation, but definitely, in my opinion, it would be best to stick with the plan. Although I should mention, I just glanced at the Chiefs depth chart again, and I forgot they have Derek Nottie and Mike Pennell are both kind of two-gap defensive tackles. So I wonder almost if Spagnuolo in this game does a lot of 4 and 5-man fronts, but in the 4-man fronts, you might take Tershawn Wharton and Mike Dana off the field and move Chris Jones to defensive end on the strong side, and then have Nottie and Pennell play more snaps than usual at defensive tackle, because those guys are they're both a lot denser than Chris Jones, and they're both a lot heavier than Tershawn Wharton. So that's what I like, kind of going back to how the Chiefs don't even really have a set scheme. That's one way, at least for this one game, that they could run something of like a lopsided 4-3 or even like a 5-2 kind of thing, depending on who they have out there. But even if they do that sort of thing, I feel like the Eagles ought to be able to, a little bit like the way the Ravens were kind of getting the Steelers to bite on, the handoff fake. There's probably a way to take the game a little bit further outside, or I don't know. There's in any case, I think a challenge, what the Eagles should see as their challenge anyway, is just get Barkley and Hurts to a certain rushing, carry count without trying to just juice that number. So obviously the thing about, well, if you run 40 times, you win, 99% of the time. You don't get there by juicing your carry count as high as you can. But if through incidental playing of the game, you can get to numbers like that, it probably does mean you set up other, winning plays. And contrary to the people who hate that rushing stat so much, it's not necessarily by just throwing the ball as much as you can. It's not a game of juicing numbers,
Exactly. So, I'm definitely going to be looking for those defensive front combinations for the Chiefs and seeing how effective it can be, not just initially, but over the course of the game when it comes to the Chiefs defense trying to slow down this Eagles rushing attack. I really think that is the key to that particular side of the game. Before we get on over to what things are looking like when the Chiefs have the ball, do have a message from our friends over at Edge Boost. How about that? Have you ever had your debit card declined or had to call your bank at 3 a.m. in Vegas? I've been there. It's happened. It's not fun. Edge Boost is the first consumer-facing online bank dedicated to the gaming industry. There are numerous benefits to using Edge Boost. $250K per day in debit deposits, unlimited withdrawals, cashback on sports betting, DFS, and sweeps, 100% approval for all gaming activity, financial segmentation for discretion, and responsible gaming. Compatible today for prediction markets, iCasino, DFS, sports betting, lottery, brick-and-mortar casinos, horse racing, and sweeps. No transaction reviews or account freezes. Visit edgeboost.bet today and use promo code ROTOPOD. That's promo code ROTOPOD. We also got a message from our friends over at Blue Wire. All right, let us flip it over to what to expect when the Chiefs have the ball going up against this kind of ferocious Eagles defense. I want to start with a conversation that we were having offline earlier this week and talking about the Chiefs' offensive line personnel combinations and specifically Joe Thuney famously moved out to left tackle during the later part of the season, I think into the postseason, and he's held up ably at that spot, of course, but naturally he is probably at his best when he's playing guard, and I think that's an important kind of tension to unpack here, because you look at this Eagles team and the front seven, it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't type of proposition. Because if you leave Thuney, on an island at the left tackle spot, are you giving up too much as far as the interior goes, where guys like Jalen Carter can kind of just break the game essentially? But at the same time, you're mitigating the impact potentially from guys like Nolan Smith who are coming on, and Zach Bond, who obviously had a terrific season in his own right. Or do you try to help to stop Jalen Carter with having Thuney on the interior, and then potentially leave your left tackle a little bit out to dry potentially? And that being an issue, of course, when the Chiefs are going to be a lot more reliant on the pass, at least we think, than the Eagles are going to be.
Yeah, I don't have any read on how good and still in game shape and just kind of prepared enough practice-wise DJ Humphries might be to play left tackle. I guess the Chiefs decided that Wanya Morris and Kingsley Suamataia were bad enough right now that they were pretty much to the point of saying anybody else. And presumably Humphries is ahead of those guys, or at least if Humphries is not ahead of those two, then they're probably just sticking with Thuney at left tackle. But as you were kind of saying, it's not just that the Eagles are so uniquely good in the defensive tackle reps. It's that Mike Caliendo, almost certainly a worse guard than at least the last time Humphries played meaningful snaps. Humphries was definitely a better tackle than Caliendo was a guard, even if Thuney is a better tackle than Humphries was then. So it seems pretty easy to grasp, in my opinion, that if Humphries is more or less the player that he was the last time he played a lot, then the sum of Humphries and Thuney, Humphries at left tackle, Thuney at left guard, is greater than Thuney at left tackle and Caliendo at left guard. But I guess the trade-off is they're trying to balance, the trade-off too of the downgrade at left tackle. Like maybe they just see Thuney to Humphries as not worth the gain at guard. I would question that if Humphries is capable of giving them quality reps, they might. I think it does. Even if it were only a one-game thing, I think it makes a lot of sense to put Thuney on Carter and Williams. Those guys getting cracks at Caliendo if they have to go one-on-one with those kinds of defensive tackles. That's a problem. And the thing is, even if you leave Thuney at left tackle, a guy like Josh Sweat, his arms are almost something like 35 inches long. Thuney's are something like 32. So Thuney can be in the perfect spot, have the perfect technique as a blocker, still have nothing to touch but air as Sweat gets a hold of his jersey and or pads. And, Sweat's a very fast defensive end. One little slip up like that, and you might lose the edge to him. So it's easy for me to imagine the whole left side of the Chiefs offensive line having a problem, because if Sweat can just get his hands on Thuney bending around the edge and Caliendo's one-on-one with Milton Williams, Mahomes probably needs to run pretty quick in that case. And I don't think, as much as Mahomes is obviously great or the best in that scenario, it's still not the scenario the Chiefs want to default to, in my opinion.
Yeah, that can't be their bread and butter.
Right. So it's not an easy call either way, but I kind of, if I'm thinking in Madden franchise mode brain, it's Humphries at left tackle and Thuney at left guard. And
as far as run pass split goes for Kansas City, like obviously they're going to prefer to be having the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hand, like no question about it. But how does that alter their passing scheme, considering the fact that you probably can't get to those deep drops? Like you're going to have to do like a decent amount of quick game, and there's an additional issue here that might be compounding, where I'm not convinced that the Chiefs can run the ball like at all.
Yeah.
In this spot, because since Pacheco came back, I just looked at his game log on RotoWire.com, where you can isolate samples like that on the player page. Pretty nifty. 3.5 yards per carry for Pacheco in his 7 games since returning from his injury. I know he gets a little bit of extra time this week, having the off week between the championship game and the Super Bowl, but has not exceeded 55 yards, has not exceeded period. And that was in his second game back, has not exceeded 20 yards in any of his last 3 outings. And obviously you can say, well, they've been using Kareem Hunt more. That doesn't make me feel better. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think the running back production is a pretty big difference from the last year with the Chiefs, even with Pacheco as said running back, because he was still productive. He took a big workload in the playoffs. They don't really have that player right now because Kareem Hunt is not that player, can't be that player. So also, when you look at the last time the Eagles and Chiefs specifically played in the Super Bowl, like better running back production for the Chiefs then than they're getting now. So it's another one of those, not just the only reason, but in the list of reasons that I think you can count the Chiefs as worse than last time. It's like that rushing variable could loom as important. I mean, Super Bowls come down to small details, even for the Chiefs, even when they win. So not to say that they can't win, even if Pacheco is not productive. But in my opinion, if Pacheco is not productive, and I don't know what to expect on that. Like, I think it comes down to his physical condition. I don't really know what that is. But if Pacheco is not productive, I don't think Kareem Hunt is productive beyond a volume sense. Like, sure, if the Eagles totally blow it and the Chiefs are up 10 points in the second half, they'll give it to Kareem Hunt just to kind of end the game. And any defense can get tired. And if they're losing attention to detail and their frustration, Kareem Hunt can produce in that scenario. But you won't find a single time this year where against a quality defense, Kareem Hunt spearheaded the offense as a runner and carried them through a difficult matchup with this one, which this one definitely is. It's the most difficult one that they have as far as that goes. So it's another reason why the Chiefs have another reason to try to throw the ball rather than run it, especially early in the game. But I don't know. The Eagles, I think, will stay in that nickel defense pretty much no matter what, both because the defensive tackle run stopping ability gives them that general luxury, and because Cooper DeJean as a slot corner is like another safety anyway. So it's kind of like a 3 safety defense with, elite gap holding ability in the defensive line. So the Eagles don't really need to change from their nickel, even if the Chiefs run from 2 tight end the whole time. And they might need to run from 2 tight end the whole time, which, Noah Gray's a good player. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, I feel like if you're the Chiefs and you need to throw the ball more to win, then it's not ideal to have to take a rep away from someone like Marquise Brown or DeAndre Hopkins to give to Noah Gray, because as a pass catching threat, those guys are a bigger threat than him. We know that. So it's like you're categorically losing something where you need to be gaining, I feel like. But the way the Chiefs could still make it work from there, nothing we haven't already seen a bunch of times. That it would be some kind of thing like, yeah, the receivers, they're not getting open at all. The running backs, they're not doing anything at all. Doesn't really matter. Mahomes just kind of runs for however many, eking out, 3rd and 7s he needs to. And Travis Kelce on little dink and dunk throws, they just keep getting these 3rd and 6s, 3rd and 7s. And all of a sudden, Travis Kelce has like 14 catches for 80 yards. And you're like, what the hell happened? And the answer is nothing else. You just like Patrick Mahomes just scrambled for first downs on 3rd and 7, and Kelce caught all these passes, and maybe you can stop them in the red zone. Especially with Oren Burks playing instead of Nakobe Dean, there's reason to think too that the Chiefs would be inclined along, the subject of just those tight ends versus those linebackers, with those cornerbacks being as good as they are. And also, if it's true that the Chiefs have an interest in running more 2 tight end to kind of, if only give more help against Josh Sweat against the left tackle, things like that, then, it just adds up to all these reasons or rather not just reasons, like a dependency for the Chiefs to get their tight end production going, because Juju Smith-Schuster's not doing anything. Xavier Worthy, he could make a big play. Sure. That's definitely a risk for the Eagles. But if he doesn't, and if they're not going to, for some reason, give the snap count that they could to Marquise Brown and DeAndre Hopkins, like you're making the game, you're putting more pressure on the game outcome, specifically on players like Noah Gray, which I don't know. It could still work. Noah Gray is still a good player. Mahomes is still the best quarterback. But the last time these teams played, the Chiefs had more at their disposal. It didn't come down to details like that. And I don't think it came down to details like that in any of their other Super Bowl wins either.
I don't either. So the more we talk about it, It really does feel like it's just going to come down to like a Herculean effort from Patrick Mahomes and a couple of like missed plays from the Eagles, because otherwise it feels like the Eagles have a counter to pretty much everything the Chiefs want to do offensively. And again, like we outlined for the first 20 or so minutes of the show, there's an edge to the idea of the Eagles being able to establish what they want to do on offense. And it's much easier to see that path for them personnel wise than it is for the Chiefs to be able to quote unquote do what they want to do on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, that could be true. The Chiefs definitely don't need to worry about details like that as much as the Eagles. Like the Eagles, at once they have all these, I think, like you were alluding to, personnel advantages, but they don't really have situational advantages except for when it's like a close game. Maybe you could say like the situations where the Eagles can just run stress-free and not wonder about like, can Hurts make this play that it's, all coming down to. It's like if they can avoid that, that's where their personnel is most dangerous as a group, I think. But the Chiefs, even if they fall behind 10 or 14 points or something like that in this game, you would still assume correctly, like, oh, they're probably going to catch up anyway. Like, who cares? They think it's a 0-score game until it's like a 4-score game or something like that. But for the Eagles, we know if they fall behind 10 points and if Barkley doesn't have a 40-yarder in the next 2 drives, they're pretty much toast at that point. So the Eagles can't fall behind and stay in a competitive mode, in my opinion. But the Chiefs, it's like even if you fall behind 10 points with the Chiefs, even if out of desperation you subtract the Noah Gray rep and put Marquise Brown on the field, it's like, what do you really think is going to happen at that? Like, of course, Mahomes has bad games occasionally, and he probably won't win every single Super Bowl he plays in from this point, but it still would just fall. It reverts to the detail of Mahomes, and that's in this league. There's no actual answer to it. The closest thing to an answer the league had was helped voluntarily by the Chiefs trading Tyreek Hill, and then the defense is all running too high until Mahomes just plays this like 5-yard field every single drop back, and it still doesn't matter because he just runs for the 5 yards if no one's open.
It really is like a death by 1,000 paper cuts type of offense. It, as a fan, like it's not as fun to watch as it could be, but the Chiefs are still winning. So why would it's a real if it ain't broke, don't fix it type of way of going about things. Let's hit a couple of X factors on either side that if they do something here in this game, it could kind of tilt things, and then we'll hit our predictions. So who maybe that's a little bit off the radar or maybe extremely on the radar for you is a major key on the Eagles side and on the Chiefs side?
The Eagles side is a little tougher because in their offense, things are more narrowly, predictably channeled. And it would feel silly, for instance, to try to think of like Kenny Gainwell or Jahan Dotson. It's like, it's there's 3 guys. There's 3 guys.
Yeah.
Always the 3 guys. Nothing really changes there. I guess what could be an X factor is AJ Brown. It just feels so obvious to point out. Like, yeah, it's AJ Brown. Clearly, it's not a bold pick to say like he might have a good game, but he'll presumably be followed around by Trent McDuffie, which will be interesting to see. McDuffie has had really, really good results, and he's an incredibly good fit for what Spagnuolo is doing on that offense, but he does have pretty short arms for a corner. He's not very tall. He is somewhat fast, but not truly faster than AJ Brown. And while McDuffie is super physical and fearless as a corner, sometimes it matters if the guy that you're trying to cover is 35, 40 pounds heavier than you, quite a bit taller than you, can reach farther than you, and isn't any slower than you. Like that kind of stuff, just enough of a sample that those kinds of things will work against the smaller and slower player. So, and that's without even the X factor. AJ Brown's an extreme X factor guy. It's like he does, as much as he has these outrageous physical tools, like he clearly has like that killer instinct too that propels him toward these kind of like outrageous outcomes that he has. So Trent McDuffie could play a great game, but if AJ Brown's on one of his best games at the same time, it just doesn't really matter who's covering him. So, and it would be, of course, a huge deal for the Eagles if they could actually get their passing game going without it just being, again, juiced numbers from playing catch up or something like that. Like if they're actually just in the flow of the game, controlling the game kind of mode, and AJ Brown's rolling, that would be a really bad sign for the Chiefs, yes. I think.
So, and completely agree on that one. And I think that it's an interesting X factor in the sense that like everyone always just talks about it. And again, I think rightly so, that the run game and Saquon Barkley and all that, the offensive line. But yeah, if the Eagles on the, let's say they go into this game wanting to throw it 25, no more than 30 times. Like if they're landing the punches with through the air with those, 7 or 8 of those targets going AJ Brown's way, and like one of those is the classic AJ Brown splash, that really could be something that is momentous within this game. I have one also within the Eagles pass catching group, Dallas Goedert.
Yeah,
I think that
really
he's
good.
Someone who's just, he's a bull in a china shop, man. Like he's
really underrated. Like yes. If he had been drafted by the Chiefs instead of the Eagles, I think he could have easily had like a Travis Kelce kind of pass catching career, but always been a little overqualified on the Eagles, and they even to this day make him run block a lot, which he's also good at.
Yeah, no, he's ready to rumble at all points. But I think it's interesting. I got the stats pulled up here. The Chiefs did allow the highest yards per target to opposing tight ends this year at 8.74, which is...
You know how many targets that was?
That would have been on... Let's see, there's 114 catches that they've allowed. And again, or 146 targets. Again, this is over a 19-game sample. Everyone else playing with the 17. But as far as the efficiency goes, it's a longer sample, and it still says that they are the worst in terms of yards per target allowed to opposing tight ends by 0.2. The next would be the Bears at 8.
That catch rate is like 80 something.
It is at 78.1, which
78.1. So yeah, that was one of those things I was kind of struggling with. I was trying to figure that out too. Like, were they truly bad at stopping tight ends, or was it one of those things like they didn't really care that other teams were throwing to their tight ends / a funnel away from McDuffie that in a lot of games landed on some tight end by default in those games. If tight end is an actual weakness of the Chiefs, then yeah, Goedert, really good pass catcher. He can absolutely just, transform into a 100-yard receiver in a game if the matchup is there.
So therein lies my kind of X factor, and now I have an itch to go back to Tennessee and get some Dallas Goedert props going, because I see the vision. I laid it out there, and it's like, oh no, we talked it out, feeling it. On the Chiefs side, who kind of stands out to you as someone that's really like a key element here? Maybe based on what we've talked about with the Chiefs, maybe it's not even a skill guy. Maybe it's a unit, like the offensive line.
Could say Thuney, could say Caliendo.
Right.
Yeah, guys like them. I think, too, you could guess other players from scrimmage players if you knew what Andy Reid was going to do with the snap count. But when they're doing these things where they put DeAndre Hopkins on the bench for Juju Smith-Schuster, or putting Marquise Brown on the bench for Juju Smith-Schuster, then it's like, okay, well, there goes one potential X factor. You put him on the bench on your own volition. Yeah. So, to be fair, Andy Reid hasn't done that. Maybe he'll surprise me. In fact, one of the ways, if I had to pick a way among the Philadelphia secondary where there would be an attackable player, I would say Cooper DeJean. I mean, there is a trade-off to having a safety playing a corner position, and it's clearly in downfield coverage. So Marquise Brown in a race with Cooper DeJean, that's, even if that's not the Chiefs' offensive approach most weeks, it seems it makes sense to me to have a guy like Brown or Worthy running against Cooper DeJean. So could be Marquise Brown, could be Xavier Worthy, but I don't know whether I don't know if Andy Reid's going to have Xavier Worthy just doing clearing routes while in 2 tight end. So it would be Noah Gray running the route instead of Marquise Brown. These kinds of things all get in the way of trying to imagine how it could all unfold. But yeah, I'll say Marquise Brown because I do think he's the player they have that is most able to beat a player like Cooper DeJean. Cooper DeJean's probably never seen a player that fast before, or Worthy, of course. But real quick, as far as like easy props go, I kind of like Samaje Perine over for receiving numbers because it was something like 0.5 catches, I thought, like 12.5 yards. And if I'm right to assume the Chiefs, especially early in the game, don't have that much reason to beat their head against the wall by running the ball, maybe they go to some of their passing personnel. And if these corners of the Eagles are good enough to delay the returns for the Chiefs receivers, maybe some of that slack falls to Perine, but I wouldn't exactly call him an X factor. I could imagine some scenarios too where Perine getting catches is very specifically a bad thing for the Chiefs because it would kind of indicate like they're not in that running out the clock mode, but rather trying to catch up, which is fine. They'll do it. They'll probably win anyway, but they'd rather have Kareem Hunt playing because it means that there's no threat at that point.
Yeah, exactly. I do think that Perine is an interesting, like, if he's doing something that does kind of indicate that maybe things aren't going well for the Chiefs, and they're like really just trying to get back on schedule and being really off schedule behind the chains on given series, that type of thing. Yeah, for me, it's really harder to isolate the X factor for the Chiefs because they're so multiple and like they're as far as like how deep into their bag they go. And it's not like the most impressive group, especially when, like you said, DeAndre Hopkins and Marquise Brown, for whatever reason, can kind of be afterthoughts within this offense. And I'm skeptical that a guy like Hopkins, like if there was that proverbial Andy Reid was saving him for this game, it would have happened against the Bills, right? Because that was a close, you have to have this type of game. And he's not out there being a factor whatsoever. So I'm dubious on it being Hopkins. So at the risk of being a cop-out artist, I will agree with you that Hollywood is kind of that guy I'm looking for to be the separator. And they need a vintage Kelce game too, I think as well. I think that he needs to be ready and available for any and all targets. Because I do think the Chiefs are going to have to go to that quick game approach, and that obviously suits him. And he's going to need to find the soft spots in those zones in the defense really quickly. I think he can still do that. Not much else, but they need to be able to just kind of extend those drives and do the methodical thing that we're used to seeing from them this year. Because if things go sideways in that regard,
they should be able to. I mean, as much as I'm picking the Eagles to win, it's because of the other non-Kelce parts that don't seem to be there this time. But Kelce, I love his overs, at least for receptions and yardage, because I think he'll catch at least 8 passes for at least whatever. I think it was 62.5 was the yards, like at least 63. Yeah.
And, I think it's not a perfect one-to-one comparison, but Zach Ertz was eating against the Eagles last time. And again, that like part of that can be explained by the fact that Washington was throwing at a ton. B, outside of Ertz, like, the Eagles were almost making that decision. Like, okay, for the most part, we're not going to let Terry McLaurin beat us. There's Zach Ertz. So a bit different, but nonetheless, I do think that Kelce, I personally think that this is it for him, win or lose. The way he's been talking this week in the media, it's like, that sounds like a guy who's ready to be done after Sunday. So I think his last game, he's gonna bring it.
It's hard to argue against that. And again, it's like the way both the Eagles defense and the Chiefs offense are built, it kind of encourages, if not compels, the Chiefs to play the kind of game where at the very least Kelce's getting a lot of targets. And I do think there might be something to like giving up the slot receiver rep to put Noah Gray out there to help Thuney at left tackle, especially against Josh Sweat.
Indeed. All right, let's get our final predictions here. I'll start. After talking this through completely again, like I said, I do have some financial interest on the Chiefs winning this game, but I'm going to say it's the Eagles. I'm going to say it's the under. I think that both of these teams are going to kind of have these long, methodical drives that ultimately result in clock getting bled out throughout the course of this game. So I think that we see this game played in the low 40s. Give me the Eagles 20. Yes, 20. And give me the Chiefs 17. So even lower than low 40s.
Yeah. On the one hand, I don't exactly see it as a game where either offense can move the ball that easily, or at least not as easily as they're used to. But I also don't quite have the guts to pick the under, especially to the degree that you did, John. But
Yeah,
when I go on a player by or like matchup by matchup basis on the personnel, it does, I feel like, normally conventionally hint at a game more like you described. It's just, it feels like it's been a long time. Is there off the top of your head that you can remember like a Super Bowl that low scoring? I can't remember.
I mean, the one that stands out would be like Rams Patriots.
Yeah. So it would be a bit of a throwback Super Bowl in that way, you know. Either of those Rams Patriots Super Bowls, I guess you could say. The Otis Smith Super Bowl was also kind of like a low scoring one. That ushered in all those new pass illegal contact rules that we love so much. But I think I'm going to go something more like 27-24, and I'll say Eagles win. I know that hits the over. I feel I don't like it, but I can't really pick either team to go lower without, I feel like, picking it to be like too lopsided in the Chiefs case, or in the Eagles case. The only way to make their score lower is to have them lose, which I'm not picking. So I'll say 27-24, but the Eagles like miss an extra point or something and had 4 touchdowns.
I do have a bet on a missed kick, but the juice is outrageous. It's like -250.
Well, Elliott's been no good from 50 or longer, but he's been pretty solid from everything else. And I know that's still not ideal at all for the Eagles. It could very well be a detail that determines they're losing this game. Butker being able to kick from 50 and Elliott categorically not being able to. But yeah, if Elliott is missing things under 50, the Eagles are in big trouble.
I got my eye on Butker maybe missing one too. I feel like he hasn't been quite as sharp this year, and obviously had the knee thing. So I don't know.
It would be funny.
It would.
In Elliott's case, it would be more so pitiful, I think, because he's already going into it as the villain. Like, even Eagles fans are like, I hate Jake Elliott. I hate him so much. So if he's also the reason they lose this game, he's basically got to go into witness protection.
Yeah, no, that would
Whereas
be...
Butker is just going to be fine, you know?
Yeah. There is a market out there for a doink, one going off the upright. That's
I would definitely pick Butker doing that, because the team that gets the favorable doink has the blessing of Satan behind them, and that's obviously Kansas City.
Absolutely. And then last kicking prop for you. There is one out there for a walk-off field goal that pays out like +650. So that would have to be time expiring.
Because unless it's a chip shot, then Elliott can do it and be the unlikely Super Bowl MVP that everyone hated, 14 hours before.
It's just everyone in Philly, which is a huge.
They still don't really. They still don't really acknowledge. They don't really like pick them up or anything. They just.
Thanks, man. All right, we're gonna go party now.
You can stay here now, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's gonna do it for us here on our Super Bowl 59 preview show. Great stuff as always, Mario. For Mario Puig, I'm John McKechnie. Thanks for listening. Additionally, be sure to tune in to our DFS breakdown. Forget who's on the mic with that one. Been a revolving cast. We've got great guys though to break down the DFS slate. So that'll be dropping on Friday of this week, and then fear not. We we don't stop just because the season's over. Mario and I will be back every Thursday.
We can't, John. We can't do it.
No, and we're not going to either. I don't want to. So draft season is upon us. Best ball markets and tournaments have already opened, so we got a lot to get to there. And then, of course, you talked about the Senior Bowl last week. We got the Combine coming up in a few weeks, and then the draft will be here before you know it. So we'll get you covered on all that stuff every single week during the offseason as well. Best of luck to everyone on their Super Bowl wagers and Super Bowl food spreads. I hope everyone's specialties come out of the oven extra nice. That's going to do it for us here. All right. Thanks for listening.